This story happened to me about 2 years ago. I had just gone through a breakup and was looking for somewhere quiet to get away for a few days. A friend of mine, Chris, offered his family's lake house. He said it was old, kind of remote, and had no internet or cable. That sounded perfect to me. Just a few nights alone to clear my head. The place was about an hour and a half north of town, tucked back on a gravel road surrounded by woods. It sat right on a narrow lake, nothing fancy, just a little dock and a rowboat. When I got there, the sun was just starting to go down. It was late September, and everything had that damp, end-of-summer chill to it. You could hear loons in the distance. The air smelled like moss and wet wood. The cabin itself was simple. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a screened-in porch facing the water. No neighbors in sight, just thick forest across the lake and along both sides. The first night was uneventful. I made dinner, drank a couple beers, read for a bit, and went to bed early. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. I'm not sure what exactly woke me. Maybe a sound, maybe just that uneasy feeling you get when you're in a new place. I remember checking the time, 2:17 a.m., then hearing something faint coming from outside. It sounded like, not waves, not the wind, but something moving in the lake, something splashing. I got up and went to the window that faced the dock. There was nothing there, just darkness. The kind of pitch black you only get when you're out in the woods. I stood there for a while, trying to make out shapes in the dark, but eventually went back to bed. The next morning, I chalked it up to an animal, maybe a raccoon or a muskrat. Day 2 was rainy. I stayed inside and read most of the afternoon. By the time the sun set, it had gotten cold enough that I decided to light a fire in the wood stove. That helped some, but the whole cabin still felt a little too quiet. That night, I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it again. Splashing. Not just one splash either. A slow, steady rhythm, like someone wading into the lake. Then silence. Then another splash, closer. It went on like that for maybe a minute. This time I got up and walked out to the screened-in porch. I left the lights off so I wouldn't ruin my night vision. The dock was maybe 40 feet away, just barely visible in the moonlight. At first I didn't see anything. The water was still. The air was completely silent. Then I noticed something weird. The boat, which had been tied up earlier, was now loose, floating a few feet away from the dock. I didn't think much of it at the time. The rope was probably old. Maybe it had just come undone. Still, something about the way it drifted slowly, as if someone had just stepped out of it, made my skin crawl. I locked the porch door behind me and went back to bed. The next morning I walked down to the dock to tie the boat back up. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Wet, barefoot prints on the wood, leading from the edge of the dock toward the shore, and stopping halfway. There were no return prints, no sign of someone getting back in the boat or walking into the woods. Just nothing. The wood was dry except for those marks. I told myself it must have been me the day before, even though I knew I hadn't gone down there barefoot. That day felt different, heavy. I couldn't relax, couldn't read, couldn't sit still. I ended up bringing one of the kitchen chairs out to the porch so I could just watch the lake. It was quiet for hours. Then, just after dusk, I saw something. A shape. Out in the water. It was low, just barely above the surface, and maybe 20 feet from the dock. At first I thought it was a log, but then it moved, not with the wind, with purpose. It dipped under and didn't come back up. I told myself it had to be an animal. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stayed in bed with the lamp on, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But around 3 a.m., I heard something again. Thud, splash, drip, drip, drip. It was coming from the porch. I got up, heart pounding, and opened the bedroom door just enough to peek down the hall. The porch light, which had been off, was now on. Through the screen, I could see a figure, tall, still, facing the window. It was standing at the end of the dock, dripping wet. Its arms hung straight down. Its head was slightly tilted, like it was listening. The moonlight caught the water running off its fingertips. I didn't move. I just stood there in the hallway, too scared to breathe. I don't know how long it stayed like that. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe more. Then it turned, not toward the boat, not toward the water, toward the cabin. I shut the bedroom door and locked it. I didn't sleep. By morning, it was gone. No footprints this time, no splash, just an empty dock and the boat tied up like nothing had happened. I left an hour later and never went back. Chris asked me once why I left so early. I told him I wasn't feeling well. I still don't know what I saw that night. I haven't told anyone. Not really. But I haven't slept near open water since. This happened to a couple I knew pretty well. I worked with the husband, Matt, for about 3 years. He was the kind of guy who always had some kind of weekend project going on, building a shed, fixing his car, restoring furniture. So when he told me they bought a rundown lake house to renovate, it wasn't a surprise. The place was about an hour outside of town, built in the 1940s. Weathered gray siding, stone chimney, and a warped front porch that looked like it had been through a dozen winters too many. But it was right on the water, peaceful, secluded, and cheap. Matt said the price was suspiciously low, even for a fixer-upper. But the paperwork was clean, and the seller, some lawyer handling an estate, seemed eager to offload it. They moved in that summer. The first few weeks were normal. They replaced windows, tore out the carpet, painted the kitchen. Nothing weird other than the occasional creaks and drafts you'd expect in a place that old. Then came the smell. It started in the living room. Matt said it was faint at first, like wet soil or mildew, but it got stronger over time. They searched for the source, looked under furniture, behind the walls, even called a plumber. Nothing. Until Matt decided to check beneath the floor. There was a square section of the living room hardwood that felt different, slightly raised, like a cover of some kind. They pried it up and found a trapdoor. It was old, heavy, reinforced with metal brackets and sealed with a thick padlock. The wood around it was discolored, and the air that came out when they lifted the boards was sharp and foul, like something had been rotting underneath for a long time. They didn't have a key, no mention of the door in any of the paperwork. So Matt did what he always did. He grabbed his bolt cutters and cracked the lock. The trapdoor opened with a moan, revealing a narrow staircase that led into darkness. He went down first. His wife, Leah, held a flashlight at the top. The stairs led to a low, unfinished crawl space. Dirt floor, wooden beams. The smell was overwhelming down there, thick and wet like mold and decay. That's when they saw the wall. It wasn't part of the foundation, just a partition made of old plywood, nailed sloppily across one end of the space. Matt said the boards looked newer than the rest of the house, like someone had put it up recently. He pried off a section and shined the light inside. What he found didn't make sense. It was a room, a small, windowless room, maybe 6 by 6 feet, with concrete walls and a single metal chair bolted to the floor. There were chains on the walls, scratches in the concrete, and something else. A single light bulb, dangling from a cord in the ceiling, still intact, still wired. There was no switch, but when they flipped the breaker upstairs, it flickered on. That's when Leah said they should stop. Something felt wrong. They resealed the trapdoor, pushed the furniture back over it, and tried to forget about it. But that smell, it didn't go away. Matt said it was worse at night, and not just the smell, sounds too. They started hearing movement, faint thuds beneath the floor, footsteps. At first they blamed it on animals, mice, maybe raccoons, but the noises were too deliberate, too rhythmic, like someone walking barefoot across packed dirt. One night, Leah swore she heard breathing, right below where she was standing in the living room. That's when Matt boarded the trapdoor shut. A few days later, they woke up to find the boards pulled up. Not broken, not clawed at, just lifted. Carefully, like someone had come up from below. They left that morning and stayed at a motel. Matt called the lawyer who sold them the house. No answer, no office, just a disconnected number. They looked deeper into the property records, and that's when they found it. The house had been vacant for over 10 years. The last listed owner was a man named Raymond Greaves, someone with a long history of criminal charges, including kidnapping. But here's the weird part. Greaves was never convicted. The charges were dropped. The records were sealed. All Matt could find was a mention of a missing person, some drifter who'd supposedly vanished in the area back in '97. Police suspected Greaves but never proved anything. The house went up for sale after Greaves died in 2010. No inspections, no walkthroughs, no disclosure. Matt told me all of this over drinks a few months later. He and Leah had moved out for good. never went back. They sold the place to another investment firm, some shell company that didn't ask questions. But here's what really got to me. At the end of our conversation, Matt said he went back one last time to grab some tools he'd left in the garage. He wasn't gone more than 30 minutes. When he came back inside, the trapdoor was wide open, and lying at the top of the stairs was a single rusted padlock. Not the one he broke, a new one, as if someone had locked it from the inside, then left the key behind. He didn't go down, didn't look, just shut the door, left the tools, and walked out. I asked him what he thought was down there. He just shook his head and said, "I think someone was living there. I think someone still is." That's the end of the story, but if you ask me, something about that house was never right. It wasn't meant to be sold, it wasn't meant to be found. And that trapdoor, I think it was there to keep something in, not out. This happened a few summers ago to my friend Josh and two of his college buddies. They'd just finished their junior year and rented a lake house for a long weekend, kind of a celebration before senior year. The place was in upstate New York, about 20 minutes from the nearest town. Remote, but not totally off the grid. It was an old rental property that mostly sat empty outside of summer. The house had a deck facing the lake, a small fire pit, and a private dock. It came with a kayak, a grill, and a 2-page rule list that mostly said, "Don't touch anything in the basement." Josh told me the first night was exactly what they'd hoped for. Burgers on the grill, music, a couple beers, and nothing but stars and silence. That kind of silence you only get out by the water. Deep, quiet, and a little unsettling if you think about it too long. They stayed up late, sitting around the fire. One of the guys, Evan, swore he saw something moving in the trees across the lake, but they brushed it off as deer or raccoons. That night, Josh said he had a hard time sleeping. Not because he was scared, just because of how quiet it was. He was used to traffic, distant sirens, people. The stillness of that place felt heavy, like it was pressing in on all sides, but nothing strange happened. Not yet. The next morning, around 8 a.m., Josh stepped out onto the deck with a cup of coffee. That's when he saw the boat. Not their kayak, not something tied up. A rowboat, wooden, dark brown, old, just kind of floating aimlessly about 15 feet from shore. At first he thought it belonged to a neighbor, even though the lake didn't really have other houses nearby. He pointed it out to the others, but no one paid much attention. They figured someone just left it drifting. But here's the thing. The boat wasn't there the day before, and it didn't move. Not really. It just stayed out there, rocking gently, facing the same direction. No oars inside, no rope, no registration numbers, just a silent boat sitting on a still lake. That night they made a joke about it, called it their ghost neighbor. Josh said he kept glancing out at it, half expecting to see someone sitting in it, but every time he looked, it was still empty. The second night, they went to bed a little earlier. No one had gotten much sleep the night before. But around 3 a.m., Evan woke everyone up. He was whispering, frantic, telling them to come outside. They followed him out to the deck in the dark. The rowboat was closer. It was maybe 10 feet from the shore now. Still drifting, but this time, it was angled toward the house. Not just drifting randomly, it was facing them. They stood there for a while, watching. No movement, no sound, just water lapping against the hull. One of them, Tyler, joked that someone was messing with them. Maybe a prank from the rental owner. But the vibe had changed. The joke stopped after that. The next morning it was closer again. Only a few feet from the bank now. Just sitting there. Still no oars, no anchor, just waiting. They called the rental agency to ask if anyone else was staying nearby. The woman on the phone said no, there weren't any neighbors on that side of the lake. No other renters that week. She offered to send someone out to move the boat, but Josh told her not to bother. Something about it made him uncomfortable. That day they didn't go swimming, didn't take the kayak out. They just stayed up near the house, mostly inside. By evening, the boat had drifted directly in front of the dock, still empty. That night was their last. They locked up early, closed the blinds, and kept the lights low. None of them said it, but they all felt the same thing. Something wasn't right. Josh told me he woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. He walked past the living room and noticed something strange. The back door, the one that led to the deck, was unlocked. He was sure they had locked it. Triple-checked it even. He walked to the door and froze. Just outside, barely visible in the moonlight, were footprints. Wet, bare, human, starting at the edge of the deck and leading up to the door. He turned on the porch light. The rowboat was gone. No ripples, no sound, no sign of it anywhere, just the footprints, leading away from the lake and ending at the doormat. He backed away, woke the others, and they stayed in the living room the rest of the night with knives from the kitchen. No one slept. At sunrise, they stepped outside. The footprints had dried, but they were still visible, narrow, pale, and far too long to belong to any of them. They searched the shore. No sign of the boat. Nothing out of place. They packed up and left before noon. Left the dishes, left the trash, didn't care about the cleaning fee. They just wanted out. Josh said he never heard from the rental agency again. He tried checking the listing a few months later, but couldn't find it. The house wasn't posted anymore. The phone number he'd used to book the place went out of service. They still talk about it sometimes, mostly when they've been drinking. But none of them really have an explanation. Josh said the worst part wasn't the boat. It wasn't even the footprints. It was the feeling that had crept in that last night. That certainty that whatever was out there had been watching them the whole time. And on the last night, it decided to come closer.